You're on.
Okay, we're back again here at allpointstv.com. We're glad to see all the technicians in place as always on time, and we got to give them a raise at some point because they're doing such an excellent job. Want to thank you for tuning in, and we're going to be here for the next hour as always from 2 o'clock to 3. We meet on Mondays. We'd like for it to be more, but the schedule's so crowded, we have to push our way in the studio.
Yeah, we're getting more crowded too. We are getting more shows coming up too. Yep.
Yeah, we are. Okay, we're back again, and we're glad to see you out there. Hope you will tune in to all the programs here at allpointstv.com. We are the program called What's Going On, and we'll try to tell you what's going on from our vantage point. Don't take our word for anything. Go check it out for yourself. We only right 99 and 9/10% of the time. I think Rush Limbaugh had a better record. I think Rush was, from what I can see, Rush was right all the time. Okay, we're coming. Rush was a icon. And I have to tell you, I don't think there'll ever be a program that will ever match what Rush Limbaugh was able to accomplish over a long period of time. That was our broadcasting excellence, and we're trying to, be a voice out here. And we hope you will stay with us as long as you stayed with, as long as this viewer stayed with him, because Rush Limbaugh had the largest audience, I think, in radio history. And it's amazing the quality of his program. I would never miss the first hour of his program because that's when he was really on fire, and he had a lot of interesting points that he made. Some of it was repetitive after the first hour, but that first hour was always a very dynamic part of his 3-hour program. His broadcast lasting from 12 to 3. And the only problem I had with it was that it collided with the program by Dennis Prager, which I think is another icon out there, and Dennis Prager is still going strong. Anyway, we're here, and we're not going anywhere. We're going to stay here. We're going to try to break our Rush Limbaugh's record, and we're going to, when they cut us out and bring some new voices in here, we're going to come in on the side, and when they leave their chair, we're going to get back on the network. Okay, I want to tell you about a couple of things. I want to first of all tell you about this race that's going on right now in Michigan, and I hope all the ones out there that are undecided, and some of you that have decided you may not want to participate in the most crucial election in Michigan's history, I think. I want to urge you to go out there on the 8th, if not before then. We don't have one day anymore for voting. We vote on multiple days. You have a lot of time to get to the polls and take out a ballot and go and cast your ballot at some point. But I would very much encourage you to vote, particularly in, I want to say particularly in all of the races, but particularly in the gubernatorial race. I went to Mueller's Orchard this past Saturday, and they had Tutor Dixon that was speaking, and a lot of the other Republican candidates were speaking. I liked all of them, by the way, and I plan to cast a vote pretty much down the ticket line, the Republican ticket line. I have to tell you, I just think we have to make a statement here in this election, and we've got to show that we are no longer going to be pushed around. And I certainly I think it's good to have a single party in control of the federal government, and that's what we have right now. And we've got to rein some of these persons in, and turn a lot of people out. By the way, a lot of people got to go home in this election on November the 8th. I went to Tutor Dixon's rally in Linden at Mueller's Orchard. I will give them a plug here. If you want some good apple cider, those guys, I think I must have drank about a gallon of that apple cider. That's the best apple cider I've had since they closed the place over there on Coldwater Road. They had the best apple cider, I thought, in the state. But then these geniuses that don't think about when you reroute lines of travel. Used to have a direct line from 75 off from Coldwater, and they changed that. You have to now go around to 475 and come back. It killed that business that was on Coldwater Road, but they had the best apple cider. But I will tell you that they had what they had yesterday, or rather 2 days ago, where a lot of people showed up too. They made a lot of money at that Archer. It's called Mueller's Archer, and they had a lot of people there. And when I was coming to the studio, I was very glad to hear that the deficit has been closed and the momentum is on Dixon's side. I think she's going to prevail in the election, but it will not come to pass if we don't go to the polls and vote. And do not take this red wave for granted.
What I think is weird. Okay, Whitmer, her actions during this, pandemic, she put people who had COVID inside of patient rehab centers and places where people were rehabilitating from coming out of the hospital, right?
Mhm.
My aunt was in one of those places, and because of Whitmer's actions, my aunt was exposed to COVID and did contract it, and ultimately she did die, and it was a contributing factor. I tell that to liberals,
Mm.
and he goes, "Yeah, but you have to look at the fact that she was trying to prevent even more deaths."
Yeah.
So I'm supposed to disregard the death of my own family because this liberals telling me they're essentially saying my aunt's life doesn't mean anything. Because let's face it, the liberals, they don't like unborn babies. They, as soon as they're 4 years old, so they can indoctrinate, send them to a book reading where you can have a drag queen read to them. They care about them. They want to indoctrinate them in that perversion, but they don't care about once you served your purpose is you pay taxes to this monstrosity they created. Then they want you to fade out of existence.
John, we're supposed to overlook a lot of things Whitmer did over the last 4 years. That's one of them. That's critical. A lot of other things she did, not equally, because people dying has been at the forefront of what we ought to be thinking about as we go to the polls. Loved ones being, these people, there were a lot of people died because of Whitmer's lockdown policies, and putting those patients, COVID patients, in there in these nursing homes. And then on top of that, as if that's not bad enough, would not let relatives visit their loved ones in those nursing homes and kept them away. Yeah, and just amazing that this woman is running a strong campaign.
In case people forget, Whitmer, at the same time she was doing this, everybody else went down to Florida to visit her father.
That's right. To be
ill. So
and her husband going up north and trying to get his boat out so he can go fishing. Had the rest of the state locked down.
The peasants are below us, so we can now have the lake to ourselves.
Yeah, the peons. We're not supposed to have the rights that the ruling class has. It's their policy, and we're being convicted if we don't follow the policy set that they don't follow themselves. We've got to make a statement here. When I read the Constitution and I read the preamble, it doesn't say we the politicians. I don't think the word politicians is not mentioned in the Constitution a single time. That term is just as absent as the term democracy in the Constitution and also in the Declaration of Independence. And that's for a reason, because the framers had an idea in mind of how, and you could tell what they felt about the two. The framers did not have a lot of confidence in politicians, and they felt that they had to be locked down, quite frankly, because in exerting power, Washington had said that government is force, and because of that, when you're wielding power, power has to be held in check. And the Constitution speaks to almost like a paranoia that the framers had. They were almost fanatic about trying to find all kinds of ways looking at all possible ways in which to limit power being abused. And everybody talks about separation of powers and the check and balance system, but there are a number of other things they put in place as well to, in fact, try to impugn and neutralize those who will wield power that goes against the code of we the people of the United States. It does not say we the politicians of the United States. It does not say we the elite of the United States. We the people of the United States. That's the mass of the people of the United States. And when they start talking about the Second Amendment and they're talking about the militia, where it says a well-regulated militia, people say, well, that's the militia then. When they talk about the right to bear arms shall not be prohibited, they want to say, well, that's for the militia. But who is the militia? The militia is the whole people. You'd be surprised to go back and see who was fighting that in that Revolutionary War, which they had just come away from that in 1783. They saw 15-year-olds out there fighting and 16-year-olds out there fighting. When this country is in fact invaded, if it ever is invaded again as it was in 1812.
Politicians make sure that won't have to happen, though. The people are going to be taking us over, just doing it through corporations and through shell corporations and payola. Let's face it, every politician, I don't care, Democrat, Republican, is probably taking money from foreign interest who's got a bug in the ear and got them to pass legislation that's favorable to their
that's going on.
That's what it is. They're selling us out by bit by bit.
Yeah, both parties are doing it too, and I don't want to make it a partisan issue. This is going on both sides of the political aisle. But the point is that if this country is invaded, then everyone has to fight. This, as the song says, this is my country. And so whenever the country needs to be defended, then the militia is everybody, and the country is called to arms. You know, they used to say that when I was in high school, it was almost automatic. You'd be at the typewriter in your typing class, and you just simply see people typing what teacher was not ready to start class. They just start typing. What they type was, now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their country. It's almost like automatic. The patriotism had been so ingrained in every quarter of the society that it just was automatic. You thought it was your duty to rise to the occasion. And many people who graduated out of high school, that the first thing they had in mind, I guess I was kind of the exception, but the first thing a lot of them had in their mind is go from high school to the military. A lot of persons would go right from 12th grade and sign up for the armed services. I was signing up to go to college, but I was probably one of the few in that neighborhood that thought about maybe get some more training. Most persons in my neighborhood were already through with school pretty much. You had to go across town, and there are a lot of things you had to do in order to get to the school. And so it's a lot of that. And then you ride in the bus across town, and there's no seating and different things like that. So a lot of them were tired of, after 12 years of having to be bused away from your neighborhood, cross town to a school in another part of the city. So in my neighborhood, I think that a lot of them just thought, well, if they can get through 12 years of public education, they were out of there. But I know what they did do. They didn't just sit on the corner and wait for an opportunity to come by. They went out there and made an opportunity. Many of them just went from the 12th grade and signed up for the military. My idea was to, I thought I was pretty good in the classroom, and I want to see what I could do on the college level, although I thought it was beyond my economic means. But I found a way in order to do it. But it was amazing how they would type, "Now is a time for all good men." They weren't recruiting women too much at that time. "Now is a time for all good men to come to the aid of their country." And I didn't go to the armed services, but that was my idea. I didn't disagree with the idea of that, because you had, at that time, you had prayer in school. I think I finished, let's see, the Engel versus Vitale case was 1962. I came out of high school, I'm dating myself here, in 1961. And so I was 1 year before they told us we'd been praying in school unconstitutionally because they found, they read the first amendment, and somehow they were able to conjure up in the First Amendment that it prohibits prayer in school. Now, you can find that in the First Amendment. Please read it to me. I read it many times. Maybe I'm missing some of the words in it. I don't think they've taken any words out of it.
And the liberals, I mean, this has got to be said too. Liberals are often point to this. They'll say it's in the Constitution, the law of separation of church and state. It's not in the Constitution. It was in a letter where Jefferson was talking to a group of people called the Danbury Baptist Church, I guess, and he was saying that there should be a wall of separation between church and state, and primarily was to keep the government out of the churches.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's what it was. And another thing is too, they also overlooked the fact that Jefferson and all these founding fathers also, in their personal correspondence, which they're using in this instance to say that is now they incorporate into the Constitution, which it doesn't exist. The idea of the wall of separation in church and state. It is done because that actually is done the way government and the bodies are actually, preserved from one another, actually, separated. But the wall of separation of church and state concept that they kind of bludgeon people with was not in the Constitution. But then you look at they also are very quiet about where all the founders actually, actually acknowledged and actually openly confirmed and encouraged the use of training with firearms for the safety of the state. So they overlooked that very conveniently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, do. I'm amazed that you knew that, John. You're exactly right. I'm always amazed at what John knows. John is very well read. Every time I do a program here, I have to run back to the library when I leave here. You're exactly right. On the weekend, the institutions of the government were closed, but they were open in the house, where they would have religious services in the body where the Congress would meet. And so if you have this idea of separation of church and state, then that would not have happened. But that's an idea that comes out of the, I think that would be somewhat the case of going back to starting in 1948 with the Everett's case. In that year, I don't think you can say prior to the actual extinguishing of the idea of you can't have prayer in school, which is the Engel versus Vitale case in '62. I don't think you can make a case that there are any leanings toward that ruling. I think the reason our school was so orderly at that time was because it started the school day off with prayer, and you kind of had the idea that in that institution, God had a presence, and so you kind of wanted to order yourself in a way in which you wouldn't be representative. We had a different outlook about things like patriotism, the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and things that's Pledge Allegiance to the flag and to the republic for which it stands. One nation in 1931, Bellamy's idea, indivisible, one nation, indivisible, one nation under God, indivisible, and indivisible is added because of the so-called Civil War. So the idea that it cannot be divided through secession, that's what that part was added to do an additional part of it. Indivisible, liberty and justice for all. We would say that, I think, in every grade level up to eighth grade. And by the time you get to high school, you wouldn't hear it too much in high school, but you would have the prayer at the beginning of the school day. I think it kind of ordered us to be more mentally in the classrooms, and all I needed was a quiet place in order to learn, because I was always attentive to learning.
Which are interesting, though. I think Bellamy, I think if what I read, though, he was a socialist.
He was a
He's a
socialist.
socialist. I mean,
Yeah,
and I think that with
he
with
was.
yes, I mean that's kind of irony too, because a lot of people I know would consider themselves a stalwart patriot,
Mhm.
and the capitalist system, the de facto system this country is founded on, embrace that, but don't know the source of it. But it's not a bad thought. Okay, it's not a bad, but I think there's a problem with us, a Pledge of Allegiance, because we pledge allegiance and we're actually compelled by our own conscience to actually be good citizens. Okay.
Yeah.
Whereas the politicians who have the power over us take an oath of office. They swear, they say, they're to protect and defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign, domestic, but then again, and denigrate it and destroy it at every turn. And when they're called on it, they just roll their eyes. Like, oh, that document, yeah, that little thing you just actually swore thousands, millions of people you're going to defend and protect. You're wiping your butt with it, but it's okay because
Yeah.
it's only incumbent upon us to actually honor our oaths.
Yeah, I would have students, some of the ones that had religious convictions, that would not feel comfortable saying the pledge. I never thought that it was compulsory that you should compel someone to do something against their convictions. If they opted out of it, that was fine with me. I had no problem with that. But I had no problem either with those that some of the students wanted to have a Bible study. I would not have led it, but I mean, I don't consider that my strong suit. Although I went to a religious college, and we had to have 1 year or 2 year? I think we had to have 1 year of study of the Bible. The first semester was the Old Testament. The second semester was the New Testament, and that was a requirement before you graduated out of this Presbyterian college. Small college, but I got a great. Well, I have to say I got a great education because it was orderly. I have to have order. I can't have the phone ringing. I can't have people talking. When I'm sitting down to study, I have it quiet, and I can sit there for hours and study. But I cannot. I was amazed how some people got to have the radio on. I can't. I have to. I have to be zoned. This is what I'm doing right now. And there are people that would. I used to have some friends over, and they would think I was ignoring them because I didn't hear them. They were talking to me. I'm reading, and they would say, "Oh, I'm glad you did that to so and so because I always thought you were ignoring me." That's when I was dating. He thought, "Come over. I'm reading. That's my reading time, and everything else is on the back burner." But what I needed was orderliness, and I think that we had order in the school because of the way we started the school day out. And I think another thing about it, the school was organized from the standpoint that they had an idea of how the school should operate. I am convinced that one of the important classes that students took in 10th grade, you didn't have to do it, you didn't take it in 11th grade and 12th grade, but in 10th grade, every student had to take gym. Now, that may not sound like a big deal, but in the gym class, what you did was that you ran around the gym. And then when you start huffing and puffing and you're hardly out of breath and you can barely breathe and all that, and you're holding you got your hands on your knees and and you're bent over, he would then give you a rest, and then he would say after a break or looked like it was like stopping and starting again, you hear him say SOS, same old stuff, SOS, and you have to start running again. But what they were doing by running, as I look at it now, is that they were taking the energy level down. You know, young people have a lot of energy. And by having that gym class, because they weren't doing Ritalin, you don't need Ritalin. You need to understand that children have a lot of energy, and sitting in a classroom when their energy is such that they should be out playing, but playing without work has no value. So you have to understand why playing is kind of like what young people do. It's a way of dispensing the energy and getting them to use up some of the energy they have. I was an athlete, but I couldn't hit that ball now. But I was a good athlete when I was coming up, and I had a 2-year scholarship in baseball when I was my last 2 years in school. I do understand the value of being physically fit. And I understand what role that class played, the gym class played in the educational system. It's a very important part of the class, because now you can go to the next class and you can sit there calmly. Don't forget, I said you start the school day off with the prayer, and then in the school, I think I had gym like third hour. And the school was organized so that there were certain things they had built into it, and it organized in such a way is that it was working seamlessly so as to accomplish the mission. And what was the mission? Here's the mission. Let's try to learn it today. Reading, writing, and counting, and doing it well. I'm just like Dennis Prager, who said last week, who gave any teacher the right to teach my child, I don't have any children, but to teach my child about sex? Where did that authority come from to do that in a classroom? You send your child to school to learn reading, writing, counting, and it's over and over and over again. If you notice it, it's organized so that the learning to read, write, and count spirals up to different levels, because you start off, I know in our book, we call it, I won't tell you what they call it, because I think they were playing some sexual games even at that time. But it was the D word and Jane. The D, they call it, the word, and Jane. I think there was some subliminal messaging going on even at that point by some of these sick people. They were slowly molding the students into a certain kind of mindset. Now it's full force with these drag queens in the classroom. I don't even know how that got into the class. I don't even know how you can be a parent and know that's going on and continue to send your child to that school. If you ask me, nobody's asking me, but I'll tell you anyway, I think that's child abuse. Sending your children to some schools today amounts to child abuse. And if they're then with a drag queen in first grade, if I had a child in that classroom, either a drag queen's coming out of there or my child's coming out of there, because I would not be sending a child to school to learn pronouns unless you're learning pronouns as the substitute for nouns, and you learn the parts of speech, yeah. But if you're talking about pronouns in terms of trying to figure out which pronoun fits your gender identity, I don't know what the problem would be in terms of you can't figure that out. And nobody had a problem figuring it out. We had people in the schools that had a certain orientation that was different from the orientation of the majority of the students of the school. There's no question about that. And we could identify who they were. And they were not always treated with the kind of respect that they deserve to be treated by being different than the majority of the students in their student body. But there was not one student, not even the ones that were in fact in a different lifestyle than the others were, that were telling people that they were not what they were when they were born. There was none of that in the school. And you didn't have but 2 bathrooms. And the one that was the masculine female, I can name one now. I see her face very clearly right now. One of them, one of the girls in that neighborhood, she was when we played marbles. You know, marbles were very big when I was coming up. And this one girl named Shirley Giles, I never forget her. She was more masculine than I was. She's not with us anymore. But some of the guys would wait. You know, you lay your marble up to the line to see which one shoots first. And I remember her saying, because guys would jerk the marbles out of the ring and put them in their pocket. She'd always say, anyone that jerk those marbles out of that pocket, they're gonna be calling you lefty. She was nobody messed with Shirley Giles. And they had a couple of them like that. And we were playing marbles out there. All the guys be out there playing marbles. They'd be down there. I was left-handed. They'd be down there shooting marbles. Everybody else. We didn't care. It was no big deal. The only ones we thought were strange were the ones we out there playing football, and they had these guys there playing the piano. We couldn't understand that. We thought they should be out there playing football with us. They had to learn how to play the piano. I guess some of them though became maestros in music and majored in it when they got to college. So what did I know? But we just living. People say we're living in a different country. We're not living in a different country. We're living in a different time. And that which was covered up to a large extent is not covered up now. It's very brazenly out in public now. And some of the brazenness makes us believe that it's different than it was when we were coming up. Some people have said to me that they think they're living in a different country. Then they're saying that I'm not living in the country of my birth. Well, where you think the country was when you were growing up? Where were the boundaries? I'm from Alabama. So when I was born in Birmingham, were the boundaries different at that time than they are now? Although I would say this, when I went to Birmingham to visit my mom's grave on her 100th birthday, to lay some flowers on my mom's grave, I went through the neighborhood and I did say to the person I ridden down with, my nephew, I did say on the way back that that's my last trip to Birmingham. There's no sense in me coming back because the place that I was raised in does not exist anymore. I mean, there are bars up to the windows, things like that. Didn't have that when I was coming up. And I did not recognize the community as something that I could, in fact, relate to because it was so different. It was cut up differently, too, by streets being altered, highways coming in and cutting up the streets, and different segues into other streets that were different when I was coming through that community. So I said, there's nothing here really reminds me of what my community, Woodlawn, was like when I was coming up. And therefore, there's no sense to me coming back. I've done what I need to do in terms of paying my respects to my mom, which I was going to do that. I couldn't find my mom's grave, by the way, the night before, but I was going to make sure I was not leaving Alabama without having done that. And I did that. But the point I'm making is that, things have changed, but I don't think you can say that the country is you're living in a different country. You're living in the same country, but you're living in the country as a continuum of the times. And a lot of persons are surprised more so than anything by the fact that a lot of things were more covered up than they were then, are now more out in the open. I mean, you didn't have the internet then, and you didn't have a lot of the communication networks that are instantaneously in your space. I mean, you didn't carry your phones around, did you? When you were coming up? And water, did you carry your water around? That those things were different. It's the same country, but times do not remain stationary. Times do change and conditions change. Norms change. But the country is the same country, but it's a country that is in a continuum from what it was at a certain point to a certain point now. And it'll be different from this point going forward into the future. There'll be a lot of things we don't know, we don't have now. When I gave a talk at one of our reunion classes, and they asked me to give the talk, and I was going back to the time period when we were in school, and I looked up some things that we have now we didn't have then, and I wanted to show them some things in the past. One of the things I mentioned was cellophane paper, wrapping paper, out of that cling wrap. I think it's called cling wrap. Okay, you didn't have that when I was coming up. That's a different. We had sandwich bags, and my little peanut butter and jelly sandwich was in one of those bags. You have a meat sandwich. The kids right now they don't carry lunches to school. That's another change. But it's the same country, but it's just that you do things differently. The culture is not stagnant. That's what I'm saying. And the things we did then, and the way you did it. I mean, we went outside and played. You can't go outside today and play. Things have changed. I mean, you should be able to go outside and ride your bicycle, but if you ride your bicycle in the wrong places, make people jump on your bike and then push you off. They didn't do that.
You can low jack it with a little chip. You ever seen those? They actually have these devices you hook up through your phone, and you can put it on your bike, and somebody steals it, you can actually track it down because it uses the Wi-Fi signals all around to coordinate where they're at, to like triangulate. So that's one thing. They're like $30-$40. But it's kind of, let's face it, years ago with the $30-$40 is what you probably paid for a brand new bicycle.
Right.
But it's like it's a good option. I mean, and there's still some bikes out there that are really cheap, but they're really cheaply made too. They don't last. But yeah, you could get these like low jack basically. Somebody's got your bike across town, you can actually track it.
Yeah. So. Just don't ever think that the times will ever remain the same. And there's some changes waiting in the future that we have not even thought of, just in terms of the technologies that will be in place there. Look at the technologies we have right now. How many persons could have imagined the technologies to be where you have you don't have a need for an encyclopedia on your shelf. We can find anything in Wikipedia that you find in the Botanical Encyclopedia. That was the Bible of information when I was coming up. If you had a Botanical Encyclopedia, you had something.
Well, look what we're doing right here. I mean, this is the internet. A TV station local would have probably bought $1 million of equipment to do what we're doing now. It'd be a limited broadcast range.
Yeah.
But by the FCC rulings, by the transmission strength, we can reach people all over the world here.
Yeah, and we got to, and we're going to continue to progress in that way. We have to make sure the culture is keeping up in terms of staying intact with these quantum leaps into the future. We have to, don't forget now, the culture has to be, you have to cultivate the environment so that the technology does not destroy that we see Mr. Nation together. And a lot of that is what's taking place. A lot of persons think that that when they say things, the country is different. It's the fact that things are moving so fast. It's Evan Toffler's work, future shock. Just the discombobulation of the times changing so fast that the norms are fractured because they're not moving at the pace in which the technologies are moving. And so the culture is being fractured because it doesn't keep up. In Toffler's future shock, his world where the world is going through a shock. that the culture is not keeping up and withstanding that which is tearing the fabric of the culture apart. And I think that's what they're referencing there. But I want to get back to my point here about this race coming up, and all of the races that are coming up. I'm throwing so much money out here right now. I just gave $50 to, I think, the most outstanding candidate is out there, and that's Kari Lake in Arizona. This is a very impressive candidate. And some of those persons that are now going to be freshmen going into the Congress, she's running for the governor of Arizona. I think she's going to win that pretty handily. I don't take it for granted. But if people turn out as they look like they're going to be doing in Arizona, they want to change down there because of their borders being violated. And they want stronger borders, and they're not going to get it from the Democrats. They're not going to get it from Joe Biden. And so they're looking for an alternative. I think she's going to be that person. And I think you're going to find a lot of them coming in, and that'll be different. And it's going to change some of the landscape for the better. You know, I'm all for, whenever the opportunity presents itself, I'm all for getting incumbents out. And when I went to hear Tutor Dixon this past weekend, I will tell you, I was impressed with almost all the speakers. It was amazing, some of the things that they were saying. You don't normally hear politicians talking this way. If they do half the things they talked about, then this country is in for a very pleasant surprise in terms of the new players coming in to be on the block. Right now, we got a lot of the person on the block need to get off the block and go home. You know, you'd be surprised of how these politicians are taking us for granted out here. And Dixon is running a great campaign. This is a great candidate. And if she is working as hard as I see her working out here, because she's everywhere, I'll be in Cairo with some folks on the 27th. They've invited me to come up there to their event. John, by the way, I saw the guy that's running against. They ran against we supported another candidate here, but he prevailed. He came to me at the rally and said that and introduced himself. And I told him that in the primary I did not support your candidacy, but now that you're running in the general election, I'm all for your campaign, because I know that you're not the one that's been in there doing the things that the country has not needed to be done in his name. And the mere fact that you're bringing some fresh ideas to the table, I have to support that, because I think that one of our problems in this country is that we have incumbency, and we have incumbency fever. I coined a term last week where I said that we have voter incumbency. That's where the voters park themselves in a party and they're continuing to vote for it over and over again, regardless as to the candidate. And people come up to me thinking that they're telling me something I want to hear by telling me they'll say, I've been a Democrat all my life, or I've been a Republican all my life. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, and have you been a fool all your life? I'm not ever going to be any one thing in the political arena all my life, because I don't know who the candidates are. And the candidates in one party can't always be the best ones. There's got to be some in the other party, at least in that particular campaign, at least one of them, where the best candidate is not in that party you've been voting in.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, though, that Tulsi Gabbard, she left the Democratic Party. I don't know if she's jumped on board with the Republicans, but that's a person who actually is a thinker. I mean, she's thinking like, look, she identified herself as being a Democrat, from my understanding, for years, but the Democratic Party has changed. The people haven't left the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left them.
That's right. For the most part. She was identifying. She had run as a representative from Hawaii and had been elected as a Democrat.
One of the most liberal states in the country, by the way.
Yeah, it is one of the most liberal states in the country. And they found out that over here it was quack, and she wasn't quacking that way, and that's why she only served. That she lost one of the last campaign because they recognized that she was that voice of independence in the Democratic Party, and that party does not allow for that. This idea of independence Democratic Party right now is like a lockstep. You either in line or you out of there, and that is more so the party line in the Democratic Party, but it's becoming that way in politics in general. You're either on board with the party line or you ostracize in the party. But you can be extreme in your. Some of it is that people are in the party and they're camouflaged as who they are inside the party. Liz Cheney is a good example of that. Liz Cheney was never a Republican. I shouldn't say she was never a member of the Republican Party. She was inside the Republican Party with the undertones of being a Democrat. Why? Because Wyoming is a Republican state.
Because she's a political chameleon. She's a political legacy family in a sense.
Yeah.
She's also well-heeled, financed. She's basically an opportunist. That's all I can say.
Very much so. And she had to conceal her Democratic leanings because that state hasn't voted for a Democrat on a national ticket since 1964 when they voted for Lyndon Johnson. You know, Landslide Johnson, who was in the same election, 1948, where they call him Landslide Johnson because he won that election by 84 votes. And there's no way in the world, given the fact he ran against a guy named Coke Stevenson, there's no way in the world, given the statue of Coke Stevenson, who was honest. Everybody knew he was honest. He was very popular in the state, and there's nowhere in the world an upstart person is going to beat Coke Stevenson, given his popularity in that state in 1948.
So I never knew that guy. I never heard that name.
Oh yeah,
I admit that one.
They call him. That's why they call Johnson Landslide Johnson, because they knew Johnson when that election. They had one person. They had a joke out. They said the guy, they called him Pancho. They're gonna make sure you knew he was Hispanic. And they had Pancho, according to the apocryphal story, on the street corner, and he was crying because his dad didn't come by to see him. And so they said, Pancho, you know your dad is dead. And the boy's wiping his eyes. He said, yeah, but he came by last night and voted for Johnson and didn't come by to see me. So that's a cemetery vote.
It's the right. I'm 59. Growing up, I always heard about the Democrats getting, vote from the dead people. I mean, I should join the Democratic Party because I like to believe in miracles, right?
Yeah, right.
But I mean, it's always on their side.
Right, it's always on their side. Reincarnation from the grave to the voting booth. And that's the same year. See, a lot of we have to go back now because we have new lens. We can look back. See, we say things have changed, and we're living in a different country now than it was in that time period. But look, in that same election, 1948. The New York Times came out with his early edition of the paper and said, Dewey wins. Yeah, that they did that prior to that 10 o'clock drop that we're now seeing, and we can now put a face on it today because we understand it a lot better. We're not as stereotyped in the country as we once were. We thought everything was elsewhere. But did Truman actually win given his level of popularity at that time?
Too bad Dewey didn't win. He was a better person.
Yeah, and I think that Truman did win the election, quite frankly. But the morning edition came out, it printed it, jumping ahead of it based upon the trends. You have a lot of trends, by the way, even now, where the trends are that, like in 2020, the trends were that it was a done deal early because Donald Trump was picking them up and laying them down. Those votes were going in a direction that was consistent with what we saw during the campaigning. We saw bigger crowds in 2020 than we saw in 2016. And we just expected a wipeout because everything was going pretty well in the country. We had a pretty good economy going. We had 6% growth according to Kudlow during that time period. We had low inflation, gas prices. I saw one sticker that said gas prices were $1 in some places $1.15. I'm not buying the tweets, bad tweets, Trump all that positive message out there. And the vote totals were 13 million more voters voted for the incumbent than it happened in any election previous to the in the 1900s, the 1800s, or any time before that, where the incumbent office holder with a track record, the only one that had unanimity in both of the elections they ran in was our greatest president, George Washington. Washington had all the electoral votes, 62 of them in 1788, and the first election ran in 1792. He ran again. He had 163 electoral votes. He had all of them at that time too. Got all the electoral votes. They didn't have one person that voted against in the electoral college, voted against the great George Washington. That's never been done before. It got close in one of the elections, and the person came and voted in opposition to the unanimity of it because he wanted George Washington, the great George Washington, standing there by himself, as he should be. Because that's our greatest president. I don't care what they say. Let me say this about Mark Levine, who did a good job last night. Mark Levine, you're doing a great job in terms of stopping your format and paying some attention to these elections coming up, because we all know how critically important it is we turn the ship of state around. Because I got to tell you, if we don't do it in this election right here, and I'm not all that confident we can even do it. If we do win, put people in this election here, we might have already crossed the Rubicon. But I am pretty certain that if we don't stop this train now and put some brakes on it, at this point, it might be beyond the pale to do it in the future. It's that critical. Plus, it will inure the people that's out here out of control to think that they're being endorsed in what they're doing, and they'll do more of it and wreck the country even more so. So how do you make it back from that level, which is very difficult to do it even now, with the deficit being what it is, with the people dismissing the Constitution of the United States? Let me say this also. I came here to say this more than anything else. I do want to talk about the importance of getting out to vote. Don't take anything for granted. There will not be a red wave unless the people come out and vote against this radicalism in the Democratic Party. The red wave will not be automatic because people are dissatisfied. They've got to go to the polls and vote, and don't take anything for granted. And in this state right here, I got to tell you, I cannot believe that this state would be so out of it that they've forgotten what this state went through over 4 years with Whitmer, who I think actually enjoys hurting people. I went to Lansing twice to protest. They had an immigrant. I had to go to Lansing. They had an immigrant that came here 22 years ago and came here the right way, quote unquote, the right way, came here legally, got a citizenship, opened up a business that was doing fairly well and could not afford, given the kind of employees that she had, could not afford to shut her business down because they had their bills to pay. And she was very cognizant of the fact that the rate in which she was paying them, you have to work to make, if you don't work 5 days a week and you're working at this level, then you don't have the luxury of missing work and not getting paid. So she could not shut her business down, thinking about what effect would have on her employees, and she decided to keep her business open. And this governor positioned an officer around the corner, so when she was driving to work, they intercepted her and put her in jail for trying to work during what they claimed was a pandemic, which we now know, based upon the science, which already had said this about the science, that the science is not Fauci. The science is a science, and Fauci is not the science. You know, the man saying I'm science. Well, not now, because we found out that much of what Fauci was talking about was in fact wrong. But I had read the book called Antoine Beauchamp or Louis Pasteur. Question mark, which one was right? And I read the research of Beauchamp, and what I saw was that Pasteur, who the pharmaceutical industry went on his view, because that's the basis of them setting up the pharmaceutical industry, this proliferation of pills, that's because of Pasteur having worn out the day in terms of getting behind his research. But Louis Pasteur was a plagiarist. And the person he plagiarized from was another person that has not gotten notoriety that Louis Pasteur got, because the ruling class favored one against the other. And Beauchamp did not get the accolades that Louis Pasteur got. And now we got this Louis Pasteur plagiarist in place. And that's who Fauci is mouthing. But Beauchamp, I knew that it was fraudulent what they were saying, because I read Beauchamp's work. Blood, the Third Element is probably his best work. I'm telling you, good people out here, do not take the election for granted. These people that's in power right now, these people that are in power are not on our side. And they've learned to disrespect us because we're not holding them to account. And we have a chance to do that right now with these elections coming up. The governor's election, definitely, we need to look at that very carefully and vote accordingly. We don't need to have this state shut down and jobs lost, 82,000 jobs lost in the state of Michigan because of the sham shutdown of these jobs in this state, because of this governor wanting to exercise power over the lives of the constituents in this state. We need to remember that as we go to the polls on the 8th. And we need to turn, I'm going to say this on the air, we need to turn Whitmer out. Be that as it may. Okay. We'll see how you do. We've got 2 weeks. And then the die will be cast one way or the other. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.